Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Maxon booth here at SIGGRAPH 2024, Day 2. Oh, people are excited. I know. We got the applause starting up. To my left is an amazing artist all around. She's presented with us at many different shows, including NAB. Did we have yet another SIGGRAPH?
Yeah.
So she's been with us back by popular demand. Let's give a big Maxon welcome to Ana Carolina. We love you.
To be fair, a lot of those are my students. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to create a workflow from ZBrush to Unreal Engine 5 in an easy way that includes mostly just ZBrush and Unreal. On top of that, to make things a little bit more interesting, I thought I would add a little bit of furriness to the situation by creating hair cards completely in ZBrush with a little bit of Substance Painter. So let's take a look at the final project, kind of what we're going for. So this is a saber-toothed tiger that I created probably over one weekend. It took me way longer than that to figure out the workflow, but once the workflow was established, it became a lot easier. And I'm going to show you guys the workflow from beginning to end, which can be extremely hard to find in a tutorial out there. As you know, there are so many ways to do fur, especially for real-time rendering and game-ready assets. And so today I'm going to take you from beginning to end with one really nice workflow. Before we get started, who am I? So, I am currently a professor at the Ringling College of Art and Design. Been working with Maxon for a while, done all sorts of cool projects like the virtual sets for those ZBrush summits 2 years ago. My past experience is in virtual reality, especially in serious games. I've done work for NASA, the American Air Force, MasterCard, all these random companies, medical. And on top of that, I also run my own business where I do online education and mentorship for people who want to be character artists or artists in the video games industry and film. So before I really jump in, what are fur cards? Can you guys hear me, by the way? Yes? Okay. What are hair cards or fur cards? Basically, they are a fake way of creating hair or fur for games or real-time rendering. As you know, Unreal is really coming up, and we're creating real-time rendering for all sorts of industries, and hair cards are still used. A lot of people do fiber hair, which is basically like the geometry for each strand of hair, but that is not very performance. And we need Unreal to move fast in order to create real good real-time things. So each one of these is a hair card, and basically we have the image of fur, like a strand of fur, on the card with some transparency. Before I could do the fur, I started by sculpting out this little tiger. I actually did this in one of my workshops. I teach a workshop every Wednesday. And we just did all of the... I've taught so much ZBrush before, so if you've seen my streams, it's the same techniques. We started with a sphere. We used some Dynamesh. The ears are Dynameshed on. That's a pro tip if you're new to sculpting. Just Dynamesh your ears on. Otherwise, they'll look like a piece of gum just stuck there, you know. And so we created this base for our tiger. One thing that a lot of my students asked me was, how much detail do we put on the body as we're sculpting this? And the answer is, if we're going to cover it in fur, not that much. Not unless you want to showcase it separately and be like, look how good I am at making skin, and look how good I am at making fur. So what we focused on was the big shapes, primary and secondary forms. And we also went and we dug these little crevices a little deeper than we would normally, so that as we put on the fur, it actually hugs those curves as we go. So let me show you what the final results looks like in ZBrush. So these kinds of skin folds, fatty placements, muscle placements, we did them a little bit more dramatic than normal, just to make sure that the fur could really, be going around those objects. So the first step towards making fur cards is to create the actual texture that's going to go on the cards itself. To do so, I use Fibermesh. We're going to start by creating a plane 3D, hitting the most important button in ZBrush, which is Make Polymesh 3D, and we're going to apply some fur in front of this plane. This plane is basically our fake hair card, and the fur will be baked onto this plane. I'm going to duplicate the plane, and I'm going to create a new plane just temporarily, make it smaller, bring it out a little bit with my gizmo, and I'm going to angle it as well, maybe even move it up a little bit. This was where the hairs will actually be spawned from. And the angle is going to give it kind of a more natural root look. Okay? The way Fibermesh works is you have to mask out a segment of your mesh, and that's where the Fibermesh will come out from. For those of you who have never seen Fibermesh before, check this out. It's under Tools, Fibermesh. You hit Preview, and it's just going to add a bunch of random stubble to your model, okay? This is ZBrush's way of creating fur and hair, and you can create an entire body of hair or head of hair using just strictly Fibermesh. So the way I like to do it is I like to create a nice even mask by just masking from the outside of my plane, inverting it, masking again, clicking one time with the control on the plane, and then clicking control outside of the plane in order to get a nice even rectangle. Then I'm going to hit Preview again. We're going to create the fur that's going to go on our cards. So I'm going to go to Modifiers, and this is where we get to change all the parameters for the fur. Starting at the top, I'm going to go top to bottom. Max Fibers controls how many hairs there are, and we don't want it to be too crowded or it'll look kind of blocky, kind of like from Minecraft. So we want to be able to see through the fibers. By mask, let's clean up kind of where the hairs are born. It just keeps it inside of the mask. And length, as the name implies, is going to increase or decrease the length of the fur. I'm going to go for a medium kind of length for this because we're making the fur that's going to cover the whole body. Okay? Coverage is basically the width of the fur. So each individual strand will get more or less width based on the coverage. As I increase the coverage, I'm starting to get less space in between the fur, so I'm going to go back to Max Fibers and turn that way down. I always find that I need less furs than I think I do, but not that little. It can be really hard to use these sliders, so just type in sometimes. It can be a little bit easier. Okay. Then the next option is scale root and scale tip. Basically, these are going to make the root chubbier or skinnier and the tip chubbier or skinnier. The default 1.25 scale root is going to just give us a little bit of a bump there, and the scale tip is just going to make it a little bit thinner. You want to avoid making the hair so thin that it starts going sub-pixel, or like each strand of hair is under a pixel in width. Because that way it won't bake properly, it'll have like little dots on the bake. So you definitely want to make sure that you have nice coverage. I'm going to make the whole thing bigger, so I'm not too worried. Next, I have gravity. I can change how much gravity affects my hair. You can really see it from the side. Woo! You can even go negative with it if you want. That's not really the look we're going for today. And then moving down, I'm going to make the base of the hair red, bright red, and the tip, I'm going to make it bright green. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to use this as a mask in Substance Painter to change the color of the hair. And basically, this is just more data for us to work with. For base colorize, I'm going to turn that all the way up to make the red more dramatic. The last few things we have to worry about is the profile and segments. The profile is basically going to be how many polygons are around the hair. So right now it's just one, so they're all flat. Change it to 5 or 6. That way the hair will become round. It will give you this note saying, oh my gosh, you're going to really push the polygons. It's okay. If I zoom in, you can kind of see that the hair is rounding out now. And segments is going to be how many polygons you have from the root to the tip. So if you want the hair to be more detailed, you can add more segments. Like so. It'll even change the gravity a little bit. Okay? Once I'm done, and I'm happy with it, let me just turn the max fibers down just ever so slightly now. Skip this note until we start. I'm going to hit accept. But before I go on and do other stuff, remember that there's a save button on the Fibermesh, which lets you save out this template in case you need to use it again for this project or other projects. I highly, highly recommend hitting save. Okay? Now that my Fibermesh is complete, I'm going to go back to my subtools. I'm going to hide this temporary plane, and I'm going to fit my Fibermesh within the plane so that it's taking up as much space as possible. This is good for textile density so that the bake turns out nice and detailed. Make sure that the root is right up to the top, but not quite touching. Okay? Then I can refine my Fibermesh. One thing I don't like is these little like scragglers on the side. So luckily with Fibermesh, if you just control drag on any of them, it will select the entire Fibermesh automatically. Then I can invert the mask by control clicking outside, go to visibility, hide PT, and it will just hide those. I'm going to get rid of them, so I'm going to go to geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Another thing you can do to refine these, I'm just going to duplicate this, keep the original, is you can give them a wave, a twirl, Maybe you can send it one to the left, another to the right. You can do whatever you want. I like using the move brush and just kind of grabbing some fiber meshes and just kind of maybe giving them a little bit of a flair. And I really like using the spiral brush. So the shortcut for that is BSJ. And that one, oh gosh, it has Sculptris Pro on. That one will just kind of give it a little bit of a wave. Oh my gosh, or a lot of a wave, depending on how you want it to go. And by the way, with this brush, if you press Alt, it will invert the direction of the way it waves. Okay? Once you're ready, we're going to export the plane and the fiber mesh separately. The plane is going to be our low poly model that's going to receive the details from the hair, and the hair will obviously be the high poly model that will give the details. So I'm going to go to Z plugin, FBX, export and import. Make sure that selected is on so I don't export everybody. And then I'm going to hit export. Let me put that here. So I'm going to name this SM for static mesh underscore plane. That's just a habit from Unreal that I have. Then I'm going to select the fibers, Z plugin, do the same steps, but I'll name this one fur. Like so. Okay, so in Substance Painter, I'm going to bake those down. I'm going to go File, New, and this is where you're going to import your low poly mesh, in this case, the plane. So let's go find that, if I can. And you can also change the document resolution. In this case, I'm going to make it 2000, 2K, to make it a little bit higher resolution. And there's my beautiful plane. I know, it's beautiful. I made it myself. Under Texture Set Settings, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to bake the details from the high poly to the low poly. You're going to find a button. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. OK, I won't do that. Bake Mesh Maps. Whoop. And then right here, under High Poly Parameters, we're going to bring in our high poly mesh, a.k.a. our fur. Let me select that. Hit Open. There's our fur. As you might notice, it's red, which tends to be a bad sign in 3D art. So that means that as I bake, the fur is too far away from the plane, and it's not going to be able to bake it properly. In order to do that, I'm going to change the cage distance until it consumes all of the fur. It's covered, and now it's going to be blue from the front. The cage is basically where it's going to project from the model to get all these details. I can select up here how big I want the bake to be. I'm going to do a 2K bake and hope for the best. And before I just hit Bake Selected Textures, I'm going to go to ID. The material ID lets me do color selection in Substance Painter. And if I change to vertex color, I can now use my poly paint, aka the red to green that we set up, as my selection. I'm also going to turn on opacity, because obviously the hairs, they need opacity to look like hairs, or they'll just look like blocks. I'm going to hit Bake Selected Textures. And you can kind of see it in real time. I love this part. Return. Isn't that beautiful? Little spaghetti situation we got going on. So let's set up the opacity so it starts looking a little bit better. So under shader settings, right here, top right, I need to make sure that, oh, this is already set up, nice. PBR Metal Rough with alpha blending, it's just a little mouthful, is turned on. Normally, PBR Metal Rough is the default. Alpha blending is going to let us use opacity. Then, under Texture Set Settings, I can go to Channels, add a channel, and add opacity. But it looks like that's already on as well, so this computer rules. I'm going to go back to my layers. And for those of you who don't know Substance Painter, it works a lot like Photoshop with the layer stacking, layers that are on top, literally show up on top. So I'm going to add a fill layer, which is a layer that fills the entire model. Right here, I see all the layer channels. I'm going to turn all of them off, because all I want to do is add opacity. And under opacity, I can click on here and search for opacity. And the opacity map that I just baked should appear. So now it's kind of being applied, and you can see it looks a lot more refined. If I add any fill layer on top of this, it's going to undo the opacity because it has an opacity map. So let's just go ahead and put it underneath. And I'm going to start by adding a little shadowing and depth by using my ambient occlusion map, which, if you don't know, that's basically like a nice soft shadowing, like global shadow layer. Under color, I'm going to search for ambient occlusion. And I should find the only one that is my ambient occlusion one that I just baked. Can you guys see the difference? Kind of like creating some shadowing effects. And then, on top of this, I want to darken the root because for the final model, it's going to look like it has a lot more depth if the roots are a little bit darker than the rest of the fur. So I'm going to add a layer, fill layer, and I'm going to give it some crazy color. If you know me, I know I can't work without crazy colors. I'm going to right-click on the layer, and I'm going to create a mask. So masks here work just like in Photoshop. Basically, the mask will show or hide parts of the layer. So for example, if I had a black mask and I paint on it with white, which is already default selection, I'm basically showing that layer coming through. But I don't want a black mask. I want a mask with color selection. This one will use my poly paints from earlier to let me select a color. So I'm going to pick the red, like so, and it's going to create the visibility just for anywhere that's red. If I change up the tolerance, it will let me kind of, increase how far this shadow goes. And I'm going to also change the hardness because we obviously don't want a crazy look with like the stripes all over the hair. Now I'm going to go back to my fill layer, turn it black or semi-black. I think a gray is good, a dark, dark gray. And then we have the fur. To export this both into ZBrush and Unreal, I'm going to go to File, Export Textures, and I'm going to select the right folder, hopefully. It's the hardest part. Where's my desktop? Hit Export. And now our files are now just PNGs that we can use. I'm going to minimize Substance Painter, and we're going to go back to ZBrush. Because now the name of the game is placing those texture maps onto the model. So, just like before, I'm going to mask out the parts that I want to place my hair cards on, and I'm going to set up my hair cards as my, I'm going to set up my Fibermesh as my hair cards. So I'm going to go to Fibermesh, Preview, and I think because I saved the file, it's already kind of set up, so I'm going to just go to Lightbox Fibers, and by the way, here you get all these cool, crazy ones. I'm just going to choose a random default one so that we can start from scratch with you guys. So that looks actually, we should stop here because I think that's perfect. So let's turn the max fibers way down. Let's turn the length also way down. Look, it has a little curl, I didn't know that. That means the revolve rate is set to anything above 0, so I'm going to set that to 0 to get a flat hair card. We're going to change the coverage to be nice and wide because we want to be able to see that texture that we set up. Let's do it even more. And we're going to do scale roots and scale tip to 1. That way, the card is nice and flat all the way through. Okay. What else? There might be a little too much segments here. If I do an entire body of a creature with this many segments, it's going to be really, really high poly. So I'm just going to say 4 or 5 is probably as far as you want to go. More segments for longer hair, less segments for shorter hair is a nice rule of thumb. Right here in this big old button, we can actually pick any texture to apply to our fiber mesh. And so now you guys can see where we're going. Under texture in the menu up here, I'm going to select import, and I'm going to go find the base color that I just exported. There it is. It's a little bit of a weird angle, so that we're going to have to fix that. Under image, I can go ahead and apply my texture. It's going to ask you if you want to auto resize. Just say yes. So it's both backwards and rotated the wrong direction. So what I'm going to do is, and this goes for almost every texture you're going to bring into ZBrush, you're going to want to hit flip V, because ZBrush's Vs are upside down from every other program, okay? Then I'm going to try to rotate it. Let's see if this is the right direction to rotate it. Once it's done, I can just reapply it right here. Yes. Does that look, oh no, now it's flipped again the wrong direction. So I rotated it the wrong direction. Let's flip V again. Yes. There we go. Can we see that the root is kind of near the skin and the tips are coming out? All right, we're getting somewhere. So where it says transparent, if you start dragging that up, it's going to automatically find the alpha map of that texture, which comes out of Substance Painter, and turn on that transparency. It looks a little creepy right now. So what we have to do is we have to adjust the length, the width, and all of this stuff to kind of make it look a little bit better. Right here, length variations, we can turn that down so that there's less variations, and also less variations, oh my God, with the cover. Okay, perfect. We can also change the amount of fibers. What you want to do is you want to select an amount that lets you not see the skin as much as possible, okay? You can optimize it a little bit later. So I spent at home, I spent a long time figuring out the least amount of number of fibers, I guess, that I can use to cover up the skin. Now, if I want to, the way I can turn the angle of this is the fiber meshes always try to find the gravity. So if I turn the model this way, the fibers will go this way. And before I start applying, save this out once you're happy with it. Now, this process is extremely tedious, so I came up with a technique for you guys that will make it a little bit better. Using the paintbrush, what I did was I figured out what areas need a clump of hair cards. For example, right here, it's going to be short and headed in this direction. But then I can use blue right here because I want the fiber meshes to be in a slightly different direction. I'm selecting by length and also direction. Okay, so for example, right here, I want the fiber meshes to be a little bit longer as they go into the sideburns, and so on. Then what we're going to do, this is, by the way, is what it kind of ended up looking like for that area of the face. Something along these lines. I couldn't think of many other colors, so I have some redundant ones. Then what we can do is go to masking, if I can find it. Mask by color, mask by polypaint. And this will bring up this little view where I can click and drag and select any polypaint color that I want. Hit OK. And now, basically, I'm going to clean this up. I have these pre-made little areas that I can just hit, apply, 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 and just change the length and things like that. So let's see how it works in real life. Fibermesh, preview, accept. Then I'm going to go alt-click back on my tiger, control, drag outside to clear my mask. I'm going to go to, where was it? Masking, mask by polypaint. Select the new color, so I guess this pink here. Invert to clear the rest of the mask that we don't need. Do a preview. Make sure that it's facing the direction you want. In this case, looks like I need a little bit more mask right here, so I'm going to just go ahead and do that manually. Like that. I can just increase the length. So let's say like length number 7 or something like that. And as you can see, I'm starting to get direction and also length controls, which makes it super easy. After I figured this out, it took me literally 20 minutes to do the entire head of hair. Or fur, I guess. I keep using those words interchangeably. And hit accept. Once you've done that for a long time, it will look something like this. What I did was, if you look in my subtool panels, I ended up creating a few more hair card textures, actually 3 total. One for the main base furs, one for the longer furs, such as the sideburns, and one for the teeny tiny little furs that help transition into the look of the skin, like so. I think I have them here that you can see. So, thin furs looked something like this. The base fur looked like this. And the long fur was more of a thin, long strand with more curl to it. So I ended up applying the entire thing like so. It's surprisingly performant. And by the way, the whiskers, also Fibermesh, just super skinny and long with the same texture on there. The problem is, how do I paint this and bring that texture over to Substance Painter and make different parts of the body different colors? Because it's really easy to just make one color for the whole head and call it a day. So I decided to try something new. Let me hide all of these fiber meshes. And we're going to go to my tiger. Obviously, he suffered an accident sometime before this presentation. Okay, we're not going to talk about that. I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and I'm going to choose whatever a medium color that I wish to have is. I like to start with like a medium tone when I'm painting. I'm going to go to Color, Fill Object, to paint the whole object. Then I'm going to start adding darker areas and lighter areas. The cool thing about this technique is that I don't need to paint any furs. I can just have to paint the head. I liked using an alpha that has like little dots to create a little bit more variation. And I should probably use my tablet for this part. Okay, it's not working. Hold up. And just kind of came in here and just lovingly, with a lot of care, painted as much parts as I wanted of my tiger. Okay, I'll be a little more careful. Maybe we can add some stripes and some things like that. It takes a lot of layers to get something to look good. I wanted to add a little bit of brightness right here. Actually, you know what? Let's do something crazy with it. I don't know. I'm feeling kind of that mood today. So I'm going to add like a star on his forehead. So you guys can see the technique works. And some hearts. or some dots or something. Like that. Just trust the process on this one. What you're going to do is you're going to bring up the furs again. You're going to turn off the texture map that's being previewed. So you're going to scroll down, texture map, maybe select it first, texture off. It's going to take on whatever color you have selected. I'm going to go ahead and select whatever the most medium color is again, color fill object. Then I'm going to project the color from the head of the tiger onto the base, or onto the furs. So I'm going to go to Subtool, Project. Let me do this with the mouse. I'm going to turn off geometry, because if I project the geometry, it's going to kind of vacuum seal it to the head. I'm going to turn the distance all the way up, because that's how far it's going to project from. And I'm going to hit Project All. And then it's going to start bringing those colors onto the furs, which makes it so much easier. If you've done furs before, you know this. So I'm going to hide this and do it for each one part of the hair individually. Just don't keep the other hair cards on, because it will create like a little bit of messiness in your projections. Once you're done with that, once you put it in the oven and you take it out of the oven, you should have something like this. This was my reference for the coloring for the original. All right, so now I have these hair cards that have poly paint. The poly paint is going to be extremely important in Unreal. To get this ready to come in, to go out into Unreal, we're going to have to do a few steps. So to start, the hair cards are already UV'd. By the time we put them on with the Fibermesh, since we selected texture, they already have UVs, and as you know, Unreal can really benefit from having UVs applied. So we don't have to worry about the UVs on that. Oh, and also the whiskers. But the head is going to need, the head, the eyes, and the fangs are all going to need UVs. So the way we're going to set that up is we're going to go to Z plugin, UV master, and we're going to hit unwrap. The symmetry button is on by default in ZBrush. If your model is not perfectly symmetrical, I recommend taking that off. Mine is, so I'm going to keep that on. I'm going to hit unwrap. Oh, first go to the lowest subdivision by hitting Shift-D a bunch of times. Try again. I make that mistake every single time I use ZBrush, in case you're wondering. And there is my unwrap. Now, how do I get this poly paint to become a texture? That's quite simple. We're going to go to the tool panel, texture, texture map, and I'm going to hit create new from poly paint. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a texture that is just our poly paint, but on a 2D projection. For those of you who don't know, UVs is just a 2D projection of your model that allows you to put a JPEG or some sort of image on there that will color it, create metallic roughness, that kind of thing. So there we have it. I did this offline for the eyes and the fangs as well. And we should have everybody good to go. If you press Shift and you click on the eyeballs, you actually turn everybody on, including the one that ate a bee. Let me hide that one. And make sure you have all of your models turned on. Looks like I don't have my eyeballs, so poor guy. Once they're all on, we're going to export that into Unreal. I'm going to go to Z plugin, FBX export import, just like before, but instead of selected, I'm going to export all the visible models. That way, they're all going to just be one FBX file that I can just import into Unreal together. Okay, so it's really important that you hide everything you don't want to bring with you. Then I'm going to hit export. It can take a little second, so I've already done it ahead of time. Then, this is the final result in Unreal. Hooray, it's cute. At least I thought so, because it's furry. I don't know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the model. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but I will show you what it looks like if I find it. I'm just going to do it with the plane for now, so I don't look for the model for half an hour in front of you guys. You just drag in the model, the textures from Substance Painter as well. Let it go. And it's going to bring up this FBX import-export options. You're going to drag it in, by the way, to the bottom drawer right here, which is called the Content Browser, which is where all your files are going to live in Unreal. The most important thing is that you don't need to mess with any of this, but where it says Vertex Color Import option, we're going to turn it from Ignore or Override to Replace. Replacing means that the poly paints from ZBrush is going to come into the Unreal as vertex color, because at the end of the day, that's what poly paint is. Okay, whoop, like so. And I won't hit import because it's just a plane. Once I import my tiger, he should look something like this. And the textures, if you go back to ZBrush, and when you're exporting, if you hit embed maps, the textures will come out together with the model in your FBX file, so you don't have to import, for example, the skin and the eyes separately, okay? But if you had to, go to texture, click on the texture you want to export, or if it's not there, go to texture. Where is it, guys? Help me out. Texture map. Select the texture map. First, select the model. Hit clone texture. Go to texture. Flip V, and then export. And then that will export the texture map for you in case you need it in Unreal later. All right? So this is kind of what my model will look like in Unreal, like so. Each one of my subtools became a material ID. Basically, I can apply a material separately to each one. And these are what we can see are our nice little hair cards that we have. So before we set those up, I'm going to create a new level so that we can kind of showcase and light it together. There's a lot to Unreal. I'm only going to show you the most default basic options that you're going to need in case you don't know Unreal. So a level is just a file like any other. So in my content browser, I'm going to right-click, create a level, name it. So I'm going to call this like lecture level. Like so. Double-click. Save the other stuff if you have to. And the level will be completely empty and honestly kind of spooky. So let's start by adding some sunlights and some lights. So I'm going to go ahead and go to lights under this like add, what is this called? Quickly add to the project button. I'm going to add a light. So a directional light is the sun. I'm going to add the skylight, which basically creates like a little bit of fill lighting, like a fake bounce lighting almost. I'm going to add a sky sphere. So right here in the search, I'm going to search for sky. Sky atmosphere is the new name for this. Now we have a sky. Then I'm also going to add fog because it just helps me be like literally less spooked out by the original level. Then I'm going to go find my model and I'm going to drag it straight in. Now, sometimes when you export out of ZBrush, it's not happening right now, but sometimes when you export out of ZBrush, some of the polygons disappear and then you start to panic, okay? If that ever happens to you, then you're going to go back to ZBrush and you're going to make sure that the scale of your project is larger. Okay, because the scale in ZBrush can be quite small when compared to Unreal, which is using centimeters as the default units. So you can use Z-Plugin Scale Master, or if you're feeling extra lazy like I was for this project, I just use the gizmo, hit this button all the way to the right, which lets you transpose all tools together, and I just pressed Shift and made it bigger by like 300 or something like that. If you press Shift, it snaps. That's why I'm pressing Shift. Then you can export. That should fix your problem. If it doesn't, try making it even bigger. Okay? So there's our tiger. As you can see, the fill lighting isn't quite doing anything. This is normal since a certain update. So I'm going to get rid of my skylights and just bring it in again. And now you can kind of see there's a little bit less dark, scary shadows in there. So let's make some materials to go onto this tiger, which is one of the most important parts of today's lecture, because we have to bring those textures in somehow. So I'm going to right-click and create a new material, starting with the skin of the tiger, so basically the skin underneath the furs. So the Unreal naming convention is M for material underscore. I'm going to call it skin. Open that up. If you guys are used to shader graphs, this is very similar to all of those. Okay. I'm going to try to keep this open and also show the tiger on the side. So we have, this is the main material, and we have all these inputs for different kind of effects. So we're going to be focusing on base color. If you guys want to learn how to do normal maps, roughness maps, metallic maps that create extra special effects with ZBrush, I actually did a lecture at SIGGRAPH last year, so I'll put the link for that right after I'm done with this. So let me go find the texture that I had exported. I've already imported it just for ease of use. There's the head texture from before. I'm going to drag it into my shader graph. And as you can see, it has multiple outputs. I'm going to drag out the RGB, which is basically the complete texture, and drag that onto my base color. Apply, or save. And I'm going to apply this material to my tiger. I like using this button right here, which browses to the file in the content browser, and then you can just carefully drag it onto his little nose, because if you put it on the rest of his fur, you know, it will kind of look a little crazy, because it's not supposed to go there. That's how UVs work. Okay? And as you can see, the nose at least looks like it's the right color, so I think we're headed in the right direction. That is the most basic default way to get your color from ZBrush to Unreal. This is the most proper way. If there's time at the end, I'll show you the improper cheating way. That's really cool. Close that. Save. By the way, every single file in Unreal inside of the content browser gets saved separately. So if you just hit like Control S, it will only save the level. Be real careful. I've learned that lesson once or twice before. We're going to make the material for the hairs themselves. So I'm going to right-click again, new material, m_fur 1, because I'm probably going to make a few. Like so. I'm going to double-click that. Drag that so that it's kind of not taking up all the space, because I want to see the preview coming in. And we're going to set this up. Now, it's going to be a few extra steps because we need opacity. We need the hair to be double-sided and a bunch of cool little things like that. I'm going to go find my textures, and these are textures I had pre-exported. So they're not the exact same ones I made, but they are using the exact same techniques. I just brought the files that Substance Painter exported into Unreal. Okay? So I'm going to start with the base color, which was the exact one that we used in ZBrush. I'm going to drag that in, and I'm going to use, as Substance Painter, it basically creates the alpha map already as the alpha channel right here. So I'm going to try to drag that into opacity. Oh no, opacity is turned off. So how do I fix that? I'm going to click on the material itself, which will give me the material options. Let me make that a little bit bigger for you guys. And under blend mode, I'm going to choose masked. Masked is basically going to be, it's going to give us the opportunity to turn on opacity. So there we have a preview. You can change the preview mesh here. So let's do a plane, for example. And I have some opacity. Now, let's go ahead and drag this material onto my fur. If I can. Oh, I should probably save it first. OK. If I zoom in, we're starting to get that effect of the little furriness. You could stop here, but I wouldn't if I were you. Now, here's the cool part. How do we get those that poly paints from ZBrush onto the model? That poly paint is currently in Unreal and on the model already. It's the vertex color. It's kind of just extra data on a vertice, just like its location. Okay. So the way to access that in the materials editor is to right-click to add a new node. It's a node-based editor, and I'm going to search for vertex color. Now, I can use the RGB, which is the total vertex color, just the red, green, blue, or the alpha. I'm going to use the RGB and put that into my base color. Hit apply. And it's a little bright, but as you can see, we're getting different colorings. And by the way, you can do this for the skin as well if you don't want to UV it, but I don't recommend it if you're doing something for actually a game project. Or if you do, don't tell anybody where you learned this. Okay? So, as you can tell, it's a little bit bright. In Photoshop, if I wanted to fix this, I might multiply this with a darker color or a darker texture to kind of darken it out a little bit. In Unreal, it's the same process, but instead of changing a layer blend modes, I can just drag out of here and say multiply. And I can multiply with the original texture because the base color is still here. The shadowy roots that we made, still there. So let's multiply those. Boop. Hit apply. OK, that looks slightly more aesthetic now. One thing about the masked mode is that it doesn't have, it's not very, basically it's all 0 or 1. It's either completely showing the pixel or not. There is no in between. To fake that look, we're going to make it like the fur is more soft looking. I'm going to add a node right here in between the alpha and the opacity mask called a dither temporal, which basically works like, do you know old newspapers, how they printed with little dots? Like kind of to create the effect of a bigger picture. Basically, it's going to use little dots to create the gray areas of our opacity map. All right, it's just going to make it a little bit more subtle. Now, we could stop here, because honestly, it's pretty close to the final. But if you'd like, you can change the roughness amount, which is basically how glossy it's going to be. The metallic, how metallic it's going to be. For example, if I change this to like 1, let's see if it does anything. So now it's trying to be metallic. That doesn't quite look good. Let's change that back. But you can just type that in directly. Or if you happen to have made a texture like that from Substance Painter, you can apply it directly to here. So for the roughness, 0.5 is fine. Now, If I look at the fur from behind the fur, you can see it kind of goes away. Can you guys kind of tell? It's like ghosting away. So we need to make sure that this fur is double-sided. Unreal is rendering the back of the plane as well. So to do that, I'm going to click back on my material, and I'm going to turn two-sided. Boop. Apply. And there we have the back sides of my fur. Now, if you can tell, the back side of my fur is really dark. So in default, in Unreal, when light hits an object, it bounces completely off. It doesn't go through the object at all, like kind of how light goes through our skin if you put a flashlight against your skin. So what we want is subsurface scattering, which lets light travel through the object. In this case, travel through the plane that is the fur. So I'm going to change my material type. Children, don't quote me on this. I've been talking to my students. But for some reason, I like two-sided foliage better than the hair preset that they have. So our fur is going to be foliage, like so. And that will enable me to turn on subsurface color. The subsurface color could be literally any color you want. To put in any color, I'm going to press and hold 3 on my keyboard for RGB, 3 vector. Click, and I'm going to put that on just so you guys can see. I'll do like a pink color. And now the bottoms of the fur should be pink. So what am I going to do? I'm going to delete the pink, and I'm going to apply the same color as my base color to my subsurface color. Hit apply. And now it should just look like fluffier and less dark. Okay? If you want it to be even less dark than this, you can apply directly from the vertex color, because as you remember, we darkened it here, so I can just drag, apply, something like that. So it's really up to you how you want it to look. As far as I know, there's like no perfect way to do this. No industry standard way to do hair yet. It's kind of still up in the air a little bit. I actually like the display better. So off screen, I went and I set up the different furs. All I did, oh, and I forgot a step. The normal map, it doesn't make a big difference, but I'm going to drag it in. The normal map basically creates the highs and lows kind of bumpiness effect of the model. Put that into your normal, hit apply. It doesn't make too much of a difference, but it's nice to have it. You already baked it, might as well put it in, okay? So I went ahead and I duplicated this material, and I created the longer furs, the super thin furs. So the total was 3 materials for the furs, and 3 materials for the skin, the eye, and the teeth. Let me close this out and save it, like so. And if I skip ahead to the correct file, save, you can kind of see. I took some time to light it. This is the original file, so I made it a little bit darker. I had to go back and forth between Unreal and ZBrush a lot to get the color just right. One thing I did in ZBrush, once I found that the hair was too light or too dark or too saturated or too unsaturated, was I came in here, turned off the texture on the head. Temporarily, I can just hit dynamic solo to turn the head on. A lot of people don't know that this feature exists, but I can just go to Poly Paint, adjust colors, and this will give me a lot of the same features as Photoshop when it comes to changing the hue and saturation of the colors, the RGB intensity. You can change it for each channel, so like red, green, and blue separately. More contrast, less contrast. The gamma will make it darker or lighter. So you can easily change the whole thing really quickly. Hit OK. So let me like make it darker, for example. Hit OK, and then I can just re-project these colors onto the furs again, re-export the FBX, re-import it in Unreal by going to the FBX, and let me find it real quick. Finding the FBX and hitting right-click, re-import. Where's the button? I guess it's turned off because I don't have extra files right now, but re-import, and basically it'll change the color. Since we're using vertex color for the fur, every time I re-import with different poly paints, it's going to automatically change. I don't have to change the material or anything like that. Okay. For the lighting and the final render, let me actually turn on my final render here. I imported a plane with a picture that I may or may not have found on Google, and I blurred it in Photoshop. So I just got that picture in, and I just applied it into material the exact same way that I made the skin material. And I just made that plane nice and big behind my object. Then I just did a little lighting. And the way I like to do lighting is I like to turn the directional lights, the skylights, all of that pretty much off. And I like to use rectangular and spotlights. So let me turn those off and we'll kind of talk through. Ooh, I like that. It's kind of like creepy. So that's basically what it would look like without the extra lights I added. Then I added on some rectangular lights to create some rim lighting on the creature, and some spotlights to create the key and the fill lights, just to make sure that it was kind of showing up. I kind of like it without this one now more, you know, how it is. So to add these lights, let me hide them again by clicking the eyeballs. I'm going to go to the Add Stuff button, Lights, and for example, I can change the rectangle lights, drag it on, and the rectangle light is amazing for rim lights because it kind of lets you control the length and the width of the light and exactly how it applies. The only thing that I always struggle with is which direction it's casting in, so it's casting in away from my character. I'm going to press W to move, E to rotate, and R to scale. So I'm going to rotate it towards my tiger. Drag it off so it's not kind of halfway. Then under the light details, I can change things like the width and the length and the color. So for example, if I want to make it like a funky color like that, I can. I can choose the source height, which will kind of elongate my rim lights and maybe make the width a little bit shorter, or I guess thinner. I can change how far it affects by changing the attenuation radius. Where is it? There it is. Basically how far it affects and things like that. So I just went with what I like to call a default 3-point lighting that I then messed up beyond all recognition. So that is basically the process here in Unreal. Let's see what else we got. There's my little plane. There's everything. And yeah, I think we're done for now. Matthias. A little early.
Great job. Any questions for Ana while we have her? Okay, we got questions from the live audience. Author, we'll start with you.
Are you able to move the cards with like physics or character motion in this type of setup?
So the question is, are you able to move the cards with physics or
Like wind or
wind? Yeah.
So yes, you are. Yes, you are. So if you want to put the cards on an actual animated character, you're going to have to rig the character, right, and animate it. You're going to, in whatever software you're doing that in, like Cinema, you're going to transfer the weight paints from the rig onto the hairs. That way they'll automatically move with the character. Then if you want to add effects in Unreal, the way I would recommend it would be material effects, so like fake winds and fake turbulence by using what we call world offset, which lets the material change where the vertex is. So you could create like this, like it's how grass is made in video games, and how it has like a waviness and all this stuff. So that's probably what I would recommend. Yes, you could do more advanced stuff than that, but that's quite advanced. Sorry?
I was wondering about render speed.
So render speed is something to look out for. So you want to work within a budget, and it's hard to say what the budget is. You know, for example, if you guys ever played the game Horizon Zero Dawn, you know the Aloy, she has the red hair. Her hair is like over 100,000 polygons with so many bones in the rig for like each braid and each strand, physics and animation. You know, and in the past we would have said you can't do that with hair. But they could. So you got to work within the budget of the overall project and figure it out. Obviously, for this project, I can go a little heavy because it's a head. But I'm pretty sure I could get this into a video game, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another question?
The wrong way to do it. Yes. Let me show you that.
So you're going to learn the wrong way to do it now.
Let's learn. It's the naughty way. Okay. So let's say, for example, you don't want to UV a model that you just want to render it in Unreal from ZBrush really quick. Okay, so what we're going to do instead of using UVs, and I'm going to use the head as an example. Let me go back to my other file. So the head. right now the head is using a material that has UVs, right? And it has that texture applied. So what I could do is I'm lost. I could create a new material that's just for vertex coloring. So go to material. I'm going to call this like vertex material. Open that up. And instead of using a texture, I can just use the exact same trick from before, vertex color. Plug that right into my base color. Save. Go back here and apply it. I guess the vertex color is a little bit brighter, so you'd have to make it a little bit darker in ZBrush. But you can literally just apply it to the whole thing, and it will just color it for you with no UVs or anything. Again, you didn't learn this from me.
The naughty way to texture.
Yeah, the naughty way.
Awesome. If you do have more questions, Ana will be available right next door at our partner booth over at Dell. So let's give her another big round of applause. Thank her for coming out. Stay tuned. We will be back here with our next presenter in just a little bit.